Hi everyone, I'm Melissa Muir, and today I'm going to talk about and demonstrate how to use the pancake dies made by Kevin Potter of Potter USA within his Potter USA hydraulic press. I have ordered a number of pancake dies from Potter USA, and they look just like this. He has so many of them that you will definitely break the bank if you wanted to try to buy every one of them. But they are kind of nice for doing simple production work. Now these are very, very affordable. They run anywhere from $18 to $25 a piece, depending on the size and the shape that you buy. They are good for hundreds of strikes where you would be able to punch out the shape repeatedly again and again and again. Now there are different makers of pancake dies. They range everywhere from, again, couple bucks like Kevin's do, around the $20 range, all the way up to several $100s. So it just kind of depends on what it is that you're doing. With these particular dies, you want to use hardened metal. So again, non-ferrous metal like copper, silver, brass, things like that. But you want to make sure that it is not annealed. If your metal is annealed, then it will not cut very well, and you will probably leave a burr or a raised edge. So you want to make sure that your metal is hard when you're going to put this in here to make your shape. Here I have a sheet of copper. It's just like a 6 by 6 inch square that I purchased. It's 20 gauge. Now if you use metal that is lower than 20 gauge, you might be able to get away with 22, but you will definitely have a raised edge that will need to be addressed at that point. But anything lower, you actually run the risk of damaging your die if you go too thick. So anything higher than 16 gauge, again, you risk damaging your die. So you want to stay in the range between 20 to 16 gauge for doing these cutouts. The dies come pre-sprung, but even if they're not, they're easy to push out. It's just a mild still that's been laser cut. And he does usually pre-spring them so that you can easily see where you need to put your metal. But in the case that it doesn't come pre-sprung, or as you begin to use this and it collapses or contracts on itself, there's an easy way to still figure out which way is up or down, because these dies will only work in one direction. If you flip it over, on the back it'll have Potter USA and it tells you this side down. Now another thing I want to point out is that we have this little dotted line right here. You don't want your metal to go below this dotted line, because if you do, with these notches right here, nothing gets cut below those notches. Okay, so you want to make certain that you've got your metal in the cutting area. When you are working with the hydraulic press, you have a nice large opening in here between your platens. Well, that can cause an issue if you have a smaller area that needs to be worked. In the instance of the pancake dies is perfect because you don't have a really thick metal that you're using or a thick surface. So one of the things that you can get, and I got this one from Kevin Potter, again, it's a 4-inch contained piece of urethane, but it's solid, and the way that it's made, it's multi-purpose. I can actually flip this over, put it onto my press, and I've closed my gap. So I no longer have to press and press and press and press and press to close this gap. I have a much smaller area now that I need to work with. Now, a very, very important thing that you need to do is center everything. Just by the design, with the platen on top of the ram, it is somewhat self-centering as far as the pressure goes, but you want to make certain that everything is centered, not off to one side or the other, or you do risk the possibility that something can shoot out like a bullet. So be smart when you're working with this, and you should be fine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my metal, my pancake die, and I'm just going to insert my metal into the pancake die. I like to try to maximize my space as much as possible, or my material. So just kind of spend some time to get things lined up wherever they need to be. I'm going to insert this in. Again, I want my die and my metal to be as centered as possible in the press. And I will go ahead and begin to raise this platen. And it takes a little bit the first couple of times to get it up to where you need it to be. Now another thing too, if I'm going to be doing some production work, I don't need to lower my bottle jack all the way down every time. I can go ahead, pull my piece out after releasing just a little bit, pull my piece out, get it reset to do the next stamping, and then come back in and do it again. But it would be very important that if you're done for the afternoon or for a couple of hours or for the night, release that pressure so that the ram comes all the way back down. Okay, as you get closer, you want to kind of listen or feel for that die to cut through your metal. You can feel it, and you may even hear kind of a clunk that sounds when you have gotten through that metal. And here we're getting close, and you could hear that click right there. And I'm just going to give it a couple more pushes. I don't want to push too hard, otherwise I risk compressing my metal and changing its gauge. So at this point I have felt it, the pressure is kind of hard to push down, so I'm going to release the pressure, and I don't have to go all the way down, just enough that I can then pull my die and my metal out. At this point my metal is still surrounding my die and it's quite tight on here, and all I need to do, just give it a little bit of a push, pull my metal out, and there it is. My shape, however, is still within my die, and you'll notice that I have a little bit of a tab here and a little goof up where I didn't quite get it all completely into my piece, but nothing that a little jeweler's saw or filing won't take care of. Some shapes, depending on what they are, you may actually be able to rotate it in the die and shear off that little tab. To remove this piece of metal, you've got a couple of options. You can either try to push it out through the front, which this one was fairly easy, and sometimes it's not quite so easy, so I'll just take a pair of flat nose or needle nose pliers and pull it back out. But at this point in time, here's my piece. On the back edge, I do have just ever so slightly a raised edge, and I can take care of that with a file. But if I've got a large production, I may not want to go through all of that effort. So once I've got the piece reshaped and done however I want, I can actually throw this into a tumbler with some stainless steel shot, throw it in there for a couple of hours, and it will smooth that down. May not be to perfection, but it's another alternative that you have. Here's an example of what I was talking about a little earlier, where you can use the die to shear off this tab. Because I'm working with a circle, it's pretty symmetrical all the way around, at least it should be. We'll find out if Kevin does as good a job as he says he does. And what I'm going to do is insert this back into the die, but this time I'm going to make the tab stick out a little bit on the outside of my circle. And I'm just putting it at the opposite end so that I know it will be sheared off once I put it back into the press. I've made certain once again that it is centered, and now I will go ahead and raise these platens back up again. And this time it will go very, very quickly because we have such little material to remove. And you can kind of, I don't know if you can hear it on the video or not, but I can kind of hear it crackling as it cuts through. And you can see, you saw that change that happened, and that was the shear going through that metal. Again, I can pull this back out. Come back over here. And now there's my tab. Push my piece back out, and I have my circle. Again, I have a couple little edges here to take care of. Nothing that a little file won't take care of though.